Today, we're looking at a blue ink by Pilot Iroshizuku Hydrangea. As always, there's timestamps down below so you can skip around, but if you've got the time, I'd appreciate you checking out the entire video. If you like blue inks, there's a link to that playlist down in the description. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. There are three papers used to try and standardize some of the writing samples: Clairfontain, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. Let's take a look at that first one, 90 GSM Clairfontain. We have no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, some shading going on, because you look at the word pilot is much darker than the word Ajisai. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly. It's Hydrangea, one way or the other. The extra fine is a little bit darker than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, some shading. Look at how quick goes from darker to lighter to darker. Brown goes from darker to lighter, 6 seconds to dry. Medium is a little lighter than the extra fine with no feather spread, halo sheen, still some shading going on. Brown goes from dark to light to dark. Fox goes from light to dark, 10 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show good color variation, and the smear test says you could likely recover it if you smeared while you were writing. To make sure there's a range of experience with this ink, the writing samples are always done with this Jinhao 159 with a 1.1 stub, Jinhao X450 with a medium, and Jinhao X750 with an extra fine. Then a Pilot E95S with a medium nib was inked up, used for a day, and used to take the notes for this video. Up next is the second standard paper, 52 GSM Tomoe River. We get no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen. It does offer some shading at times. Take a look at the T in Pilot is a bit darker. The I in Iroshizuku is a bit darker, as is the H. The extra fine is a little bit darker than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen. There are spots of shading, like the word the is darker than the word quick. Brown starts darker and works its way lighter. 8 seconds to dry. Medium is the same tone as the extra fine with no feather spread, halo sheen. It does shade. Brown starts a little darker, gets a little lighter, gets a little darker again. 14 seconds to dry. Scrubby for both far left to far right show decent color variation, but the smear test, I don't think you could recover this if you smeared while you were writing. I agree with Vita. There's a lot to learn by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. A line of ink is put down, and then it's put into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And we see that what would have been the blue is actually more of a turquoise that's pushing its way up fairly evenly, and up at the top we see a very nice purple. Now the one on the right is let dry for 10 minutes before it's dunked into water. And that turquoise at the bottom is really starting to form a line and get in there. Now some of it is still moving up, but a lot of it stayed, which makes you feel like the turquoise might be a little bit of a hang-around type of a color. The last standard paper is 80 GSM Rhodia dot pad. We have no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen. It offers some moments of shading. Not tremendous, but like the I in Iroshizuku looks a little bit darker, as does the T in Pilot. Extra fine is a tad bit lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen. Only moments of gentle shading, like brown starts a little darker, gets a little lighter. Quick starts a little darker, gets a little lighter, then a bit darker again at the K. 6 seconds to dry. Medium is darker than the extra fine, with no feather spread, halo sheen, almost no real shading to see here. 11 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both do show some color variation, although we don't get much in the medium, and the smear test says you could likely recover it if you smeared while you were writing. Resistance tests are done to see how this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it may be to clean from your pen. The smear is allowed to dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, it's holding up fairly well, which would make me feel confident using it in a note-taking situation if I had to go back and highlight. Water is only lifting the darkest tones. It's really leaving a lot of the blue still in place, not completely removing it from the paper. at all. Now, pen flush is doing a bit more than water, but it's not really breaking it up and removing it from the paper. This 1/3 bleach solution is removing most of it, still leaving some of that turquoise behind as it seems to have bonded with the paper some. Now, it only took water to get this out of my pen though, despite what this says. Additional writing samples are done on additional papers, and this one is Fabriano Echo Qua. We have no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, some moments of shading, like the I in Ajisai is a bit darker than the rest of the word, but that's about it. Not really much shading happening here. The extra fine is the same tone as the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shading, 5 seconds to dry. The medium is the same tone as the extra fine with no feather spread, halo sheens, some moments of shading. Look at the is darker than the word quick. Brown starts darker, gets lighter, and gets darker again. 8 seconds to dry. Scrubby of the extra fine shows no color variation. We didn't get any. Scrubby of the medium shows some, shows more than we got in the writing. But the smear test says you could likely recover it if you smeared while you were writing. For the inks tested, the average viscosity was 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Iroshizuku's Hydrangea has a viscosity of 2.18, making it normal. The next writing sample is done on Leuchtturm 1917 paper. We have no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, only some spots of shading, but I really wouldn't call that too much for shade. The extra fine is just a tad darker than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, a few more spots of shading. Look at how the is darker than the word quick, and quick goes from a mid-tone to a light tone to a dark tone. Brown starts dark and works its way light, and only 4 seconds to dry. Medium is darker than the extra fine, with no feather spread, halo sheen. It does offer some shading, like brown starts a little darker, gets a little lighter, gets a little darker. 6 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both do show some color variation, left to right, and we basically got some. The smear test says you could likely not recover this if you smeared while you were writing. For the inks tested, there is an average dry time of 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Iroshizuku Hydrangea has an average dry time of 9 seconds, making this a faster drying ink. The last writing sample is done on crowd favorite 20-pound copy paper. We do see a number of bleed spots that are coming through. They did not touch the page underneath, but they would render the back of the page unusable if you wanted to do that. It does cause a lot of show through, but it's not the same as the ghosting itself. It's a result of the bleeding. That medium at the top does have minor feathering all over it. It does have some spread, no halo, no sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is a little bit lighter tone than that medium. It does have some minor feathering all over it. None of the feathering here I can see stopping someone from using it. It does spread to about a medium. It has no halo sheen. Moments of shading, like you see the LA in Lazy is a bit darker than the ZY. 1 second to dry. Now the scrubby does show some color variation, and there is some when you look at it up in the writing. And a smear test, you can use this without worry of smearing. It dries that fast. Instead of finding inks that look like Iroshizuku's Hydrangea, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. For that blue, I went with a nice red from Bookbingers, the Red Spitting Cobra. If you'd prefer a different complement color, then take a look down in the description where you're going to see links to playlists. So what do I think of Iroshizuku's Hydrangea? It does give some shading and some tone variation depending on the pen. It is a dependable, predictable blue that will pass in a professional environment. I'm glad I don't have to use up a bottle of this though. Not that it's bad, just that it's not to my choosing. So what nib and pen would give the best writing experience with this ink? Wet pens tend to not have shading but have a much nicer dark tone, where a drier pen will give you the opportunity for some of that shading. For me in this case, I would prefer this from a good wet fine. I hope you got something out of this video, and come back tomorrow when we're going to take a look at Lami's Pacific Blue.